national security. And when we speak about the results of this operation, we don't speak only about the short-term situation. We don't speak only about achieving something that will exist for the next few months. We understand now that what we saw from the Hamas, it's something absolutely different. And the results and the conclusion is that we can't live again with a military capability next to our border. And it means that the only solution that we can have and we can achieve is to get rid of the Hamas military capability and to make sure that the Hamas will not control the Gaza Strip. And the priority list, when you discuss all the elements before taking decisions, the view from the outside view is part of it, but it will not be the leading thought.
Just to get the exact quote, I've been able to pull it up. I'll have to translate it. This is a bit close to my face. If the world won't like it, so it won't like it. It's not the children of the world who were murdered. Our children were murdered.
Okay, right. Well, I brought to mind a little about David Ben-Gurion's famous comment, being the Hebrew word for the UN, but basically...
It's been part of the Israeli mentality for decades.
Right.
This war in particular is going to bring this question to a head if it already hasn't.
Right, but of course, by the way, speaking of the United States, reports in the Israeli media that U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was in the Kiryas, still here in Tel Aviv, doing this last alert, and he had to again take shelter. Of course, it's the U.S. It's really the U.S.'s opinion.
It's even more than it, you know.
Well, very good.
We hear information that President Biden might come.
We've reported,
and this is something important. Why? Because it means that he comes to make sure that the Israeli activities will follow the American policy as well.
Right.
Some kind of a polite way to make sure that we take the American view, at least, by consideration.
All right. I want to thank Reserves IDF Colonel Itamar Yar for joining us, and of course, our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. We want to leave with a little bit of a different look here, because we've talked about the international attention the war here in Israel is gaining. It's also sparking social media debates in many areas, including among the celebrities, the entertainment field, and internationally known athletes. Now, some are using their platform to promote peace, while others to promote propaganda. On a cold set, it breaks down how the war is impacting even the global world of sports.
As a war rages between Israel and Hamas, the worldwide sporting arena is becoming a battleground of its own. Famous athletes are taking a stance in the brutal massacre of Israeli civilians and the following attacks by Israel in the Gaza Strip. Tunisian tennis star Ons Jabeur took to Instagram, posting a story stating what Palestinians have been going through during the last 75 years is indescribable, and ending her post with the hashtag #FreePalestine. This sparked a strong response by the Israel Tennis Association, blaming Jabeur for supporting a, quote, murderous terrorist organization. She's not the only athlete in the line of fire. Real Madrid legend Karim Benzema sparking flames with his post on X.
All our prayers for the inhabitants of Gaza who are once again victims of these unjust bombings which spare no women or children.
Former Israeli goalkeeper Dudu Await responding to Benzema in 5 languages: Hebrew, Arabic, French, Spanish, and English, calling Benzema a, quote, big son of a bee. And while a war of words has broken out between athletes off the field, some organizations are speaking out. The NBA as a whole posting their solidarity for the people of Israel. Boxing champion Floyd Mayweather is even going beyond empty words on social media, sending his private plane to Israel full of food, protective vests, and critical supplies for Israeli soldiers, according to a source close to Mayweather. A clear sign of solidarity with the Jewish people. And as the war between Hamas and Israel escalates, it will be telling to see which athletes use their platform for peace and which just add fuel to the social media fire.
That wraps it up for me today, but please stay with I-24 News. We'll be back in about 3 minutes continuing our live coverage of Israel's war against Hamas, its fight for its life and its fight for the lives of its citizens. Stay with us.
Israel is officially in a state of war.
This is a very active scene, and we need to get in the car as we're talking.
More than 100 soldiers and civilians have been kidnapped.
It just don't know anything.
Entire families, including babies and children and elderly, were butchered in their beds.
Awaken the giant, and we are ready and we are strong.
Everyone is showing up. This is the unity.
This particular project, with a gross capacity of 103.5 megawatt, will be producing around 230 gigawatt hour of clean renewable energy per year.
Hemos salido aquí donde nos ven para clamar por la lluvia. Si en verdad en estos momentos el calentamiento global está afectando a Bolivia, y no solo a Bolivia, sino a todo el mundo entero. Y nosotros necesitamos lluvia para los sembradíos.
Quito reserve, we have the right ingredients and we have to do the job. And then if we have the right ingredients and we do the job, that the Quito can be protected.
Welcome to the special broadcast here on 924 News. We continue our rolling coverage, day 10 of the war that was forced on Israel by the murderous Hamas terror group. The opening of the Israeli Parliament's winter session today began with a minute of silence commemorating over 1,400 Israelis who were slaughtered, and was also interrupted twice due to rocket fire towards Jerusalem and central Israel. One of many barrages of rockets today, the latest one only short minutes ago. In the north, Hezbollah opening fire on IDF positions, who in turn attacked the source of the shooting in Lebanon, underlining the question on Hezbollah's desire to get in or stay out. Meanwhile, the IDF continues to get ready for a ground operation in the Gaza Strip, while dozens of Hamas military headquarters and mortar launch positions were destroyed by air. The head of Hamas's intelligence in the Han Yunis brigade eliminated, but with Hamas leaders knowing they are dead men walking, will it make them even more radical and barbaric than they are? Well, judging by the fact that they're actively preventing Gaza civilians from evacuating despite IDF pleas, that seems to be the case. And more so in relation to the battle to free Israeli hostages. 199 families officially notified their loved ones are held captive in the Gaza Strip. All of this, maybe no boots on the ground, but yes, feet on the ground. US President Joe Biden might very well arrive in Israel as soon as the day after tomorrow. But where a clear line of light is drawn, evil begins. Before we get here in the studio with all the analysis, we start our broadcast in the field. We're heading to our Mary McAuliffe down south in the city of Ashkelon. Mary, Airstrikes are seen as, the pre-gaming, so to speak. IDF forces ready to go, but it might take a bit longer. Meanwhile, the home front command, as we call it, the battle over the lives of so many people who were injured during the massacres Saturday continues. So the fight for life on all fronts.
That's right, Ellie. So we're here at Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon. It's just over 4 miles from the Gaza border, and of course that means it is the main hospital to receive patients coming from those border community areas, as well as, of course, from those attacks that happened well over a week ago. We're here in Ashkelon. We've heard a number of different rocket sirens overhead throughout the day. This has been the situation for residents in the city ever since this began 10 days ago, continuing to run to shelters and continuing here at the hospital. We continue to see the hospital staff working really around the clock to try and provide care to some of these residents here. There are 8 Ashkelon residents who are still hospitalized in serious condition here. 3 people have died here in the city, but as these hospital workers continue to work around the clock to try and save lives, dealing with both soldiers as well as just residents and civilians, most of them civilians here, there are a number of people in this area who have also been trying to lift the spirits and to provide some comfort. So we'll go over here and show you they're bringing food, and we're bringing you to talk to one of the residents here. He is a British citizen, but a resident of Ashkelon for a long time now. And so just tell me, this is Jeff, tell me exactly what you're doing here. Why did you come out to the hospital?
Well, I realized that I had to do something to help here. Obviously, I'm 50 years too old to be on the front line, but no, this was the next best thing. Come down here and give some backup and support to the military, the staff in the hospital, the ambulance crews. It was. I realised that I had to do it. I couldn't sit at home and not do anything. I decided to stay in Ashkelon and not to go back to the UK at the start of the war. Israel's made me very welcome in the 3.5 years I've been here. I've built up a lot of loyalty to Israel, and it was the only thing to do. I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd gone home.
It's really amazing what you all are doing, and we can attest to it. We've seen the impact that you guys have had just being here, to providing food and providing coffee and tea to all the workers and the injured patients here. So now the mayor here in Ashkelon is calling on the government to try and evacuate all the residents, to have them flee to safer parts of the country. Do you think that should happen? Do you want to leave, or do you think they should stay here?
I certainly don't want to leave. That's a very difficult question to answer without any thought. But obviously, none of us knows what's going to happen over the next few days or the next week or so. But I would have thought the thing to do is to stay, that we should stay and carry on doing what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So that's just one of the many voices, one of the many volunteers who are here in the city, and one of the many residents who are saying, we don't plan to leave despite the sirens.
Yes, Mary McAuliffe down south in the Soroka Hospital, in the Barzilai Hospital, in the city of Ashkelon, the desire to life is stronger than all else. Thank you very much for this, Mary McAuliffe. We're staying down south, moving to the city of Sderot, more or less a military zone at this point in time. I-24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev standing by there. Jonathan, the targeted killings continue, targeted assassination, still in slow pace, but it is clear that this is high on the Israeli to-do list.
That's correct. Every time anybody, Hamas official, pops up from the underground Gaza basements and tunnels where they are, they're killed, but it's clear that the highest ranking officials are still there, and it seems they have no intention of popping up. The cause of a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, I think they were way too premature, and if they're true for Gaza itself, they're especially true for the underground Gaza. The people there have enough fuel, enough electricity, enough water. They can stay there for weeks and weeks. And here in Sderot, which just about an hour ago took another direct hit, we can still see and trucks and homes in Sderot look like this, a reminder to the terrible, terrible massacre this city and the surrounding communities witnessed just over a week ago.
And Jonathan, briefly before we let you go, I think that we need to update our terminology to an extent because as we speak, there are tens of thousands of Israelis displaced, refugees in their own country. And we're hearing those terms, refugees, displaced, in the context of what is happening on the other side of the border. And we'll get back to that in a second here in studio. But we need to stress tens of thousands of Israelis, refugees.
Exactly, and we're constantly hearing about Palestinian refugees. A tragedy. We all agree. We don't want to see anyone misplaced, but I don't see anyone in the world speaking about Israeli refugees, and there are hundreds of thousands of them because from the southern communities where we are, and the northern communities where everybody up to 2 kilometers from the Lebanon border had to be displaced. No one ignited the war here in Sderot or in the other southern communities or in the northern communities. They came from the other side, and people needed to flee their homes, and they're now refugees. Let's see someone in the world speak about it. Don't hold your breath, Annie.
Exactly, Jonathan. We're not holding our breaths. We keep on going. That's the only way. Thank you very much, 24 News Senior Defense Correspondent Jonathan Regev. And joining us now here in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Mr. Eitan Dangut, former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories. Major General Dangut, thank you, as always, for joining us. I do want us to talk about the IDF essentially begging, no other way to put it, begging Palestinians in the Gaza Strip to relocate, to move, to evacuate themselves, and Hamas actively preventing them from doing so. Some report that they're even taking their car keys and setting up blockades to do so. And Cairo is not budging. So how do you see this arena evolving?
First of all, it's a very clear direction that we are on a war, and on the war you have to behave much more shortly without expanding your activities with all this kind of humanitarian, but according to the law of the international law concerning wars. What has been done is by the IDF is warning the population to evacuate themselves to the south part of Gaza in order to save their life, because it's very clear that in the north part of Gaza, where we have 1.1 million people who are living, it's half of the population of Gaza, who are living in the middle of life with the Hamas, with the underground tunnels, with using the rockets and all the tunnels they prepared against centuries of the Israelis. It's a mix. They are taking the population and are using them as prevent or defend their life.
Human shields.
In the form human shields, you're right. What has been, as I know for now, was published that between 500,000 people to 600,000 all move to the south or change their place from the north part in this area of Gaza City to schools and places, while the international community like UNRWA or other kind of movement from United Nations, Red Cross, etc., can organize themselves. And we have a very close contact, with my experience with this organization, that we know exactly when the most of the population are there. But the behavior of Hamas shows one thing. Hamas bait its defend is way of fighting with, but in a situation of entering to Gaza, by make a lot of, let's say, as you say, a carpet of defending themselves, fighting,
This is how they treat civilians.
For many,
Palestinians, they couldn't care less.
According to the fact that the goal of this operation is to destroy Hamas, to be active as a terror organization with Jihad Islamic in the future, we are not, and very important also, maybe we'll talk later about the goal of this operation. I think that we will have to do it in situation that Hamas also preventing the population to move. On the other hand, I want to say that in the last 48 hours, the world of humanitarian is raising by many people. You just make equal to the fact that in Israel, thousands thousands of people evacuate from their home, refugees in their country with a lot of bloodshed, some of them under the threats they have now on the north. The world is not, never will be able to make it balance. I think that we will have to continue with this way. Also, by the way, Lebanon, we identify starting of evacuate of population from the south area of Lebanon towards the center or towards Beirut area. They have a lot of experience what happened in 2006 as well. So for now, it looks like Hamas also under pressure because Hamas, I think, he's prepared himself towards such entry of IDF. It is not coming yet. And I think, by the way, there is a lot of recommendation in the Israeli press today by many experts, we can call them, to advise when to enter, etc. The IDF continue with its readiness, continue with offensive strike, continue to destroy structure of Hezbollah, to destroy command and control areas in order to make much and much more easy this hard step of a ground movement or deployment in Gaza.
So what we're seeing now from air is, again, some sort of a pre-gaming ahead of the ground operation. But we do need to say that with all humbleness, we do not know what Hamas prepared for IDF forces once they're in, because obviously Hamas took it into consideration.
I think, Ali, as close as we are towards maybe the next step, you see that there is a change by the airstrike that is coming to serve this ground operation.
Right. Okay, Major General Dangot, you're staying with us, of course, all throughout this broadcast. But as we speak, the efforts to identify more and more bodies still underway. Israeli authorities have placed a death toll from Hamas's deadly rampage last week at 1,400 Israelis, but of them, only about half have been identified at Israel's Medical Forensic Center. Dozens of new bodies come in every day, and we hope to identify them and bring them to proper burial. But as our Ariel Osseron reports at 24 News Middle East correspondent, some of the corpses are in such horrendous condition that they may never be identified. And please beware, some of the images that you're about to see are very disturbing.
It's been 9 days since the horrific slaughter in the communities surrounding the Gaza Strip, and the dust is still settling. But at Israel's National Medical Forensic Center, examiners are working around the clock to identify as many of the 1,400 bodies. And at times, it's an impossible task.
And the remains here are charred. You cannot see what is there. Again, roll another one. And this, when we separated it, we see that there are two people there at least. We don't know how many people are there. So these people were sitting in the room, and they were not shot because we don't see any metal fragments there. But they were burned because they were not shot. This is like a crematorium. They were burned in the security room, and this is what is actually left from them. I don't know if we will be able to take DNA from these samples because they are very charged. You can see here two spines, another one. See, two spines, and Dr. Nachman, can you show two ribs, two sets of ribs? And this is an adult with a child. They're sitting together and hug sorry. The adult is hugging the child. And no, the first one. And Dr. Nachman thinks it might, this metal wire that you see here might use to tie two bodies together. And they were burned like this.
Since last Saturday, the center's examiners have checked over 950 body bags. Some have the remains of more than one body of victims from the border communities, the Desert Music Festival, and security forces. So far, there are about 500 bodies that were identified, and there are still close to 300 bodies that remain unidentified, and new ones keep coming in.
We've been getting samples from the deceased. We're sampling them for the right amount of material that we'll need to extract DNA for. Then we'll use that to create a genetic profile and compare it to the family members who wait for the answers.
Many of the bodies have bullet wounds, some also in the hands, as the victims were trying to protect themselves in their final moments. Burnt babies, headless bodies. Some of the bodies are in such bad condition that they may never be identified.
So this is a baby mattress. But just by addition by the sign or the size of the spot, it seemed that he was bleeding, or he or she were bleeding in their bed.
I never saw anything like this. This is heart-wrenching because you can see innocent people that were just butchered, and people that were shot where they were tied, people that were burned to death, people that were tied together. So this is cruelty, something that you can't imagine anything like that.
With a ground invasion looming and increasing international criticism over Israel's response, there is also a growing movement of people denying that Hamas terrorists committed such horrific acts of violence and torture. But hundreds of people, from first responders to the medical examiners at this center, have seen it all.
You've seen this happen. I show you pictures of dead bodies and also babies. You've seen it. And I don't know how many were decapitated and so on. We see people without heads. But things that happened, just to deny it didn't happen, you saw the picture, you see the bodies, it's here.
You can tell yourself any story that you want, and you can believe it. So, if you refuse to believe that this happened, even though you see the pictures, you see the videos, you see the signs, it is all recorded.
Yes, and as we speak, preparations ahead of a pending visit by the American president here in Israel, as soon as the day after tomorrow, Wednesday, underway. The United States has thrown its full support behind Israel's war against Hamas. But what does it mean exactly, and what will the cost be? Our 24 News correspondent Ariel Levin-Waldman explains what the U.S. has brought to bear.
A U.S. carrier strike group carries enough firepower to level a small nation. The Biden administration has sent 2 of them to the Mediterranean as a show of force to support Israel.
We've moved the U.S. carrier fleet to the eastern Mediterranean, and we're sending more fighter jets there in that region, and made it clear to the Iranians, be careful.
Each strike group has close to 70 warplanes, thousands of troops, and a host of missile support boats and destroyers. The United States has made its interests clear. This war between Israel and Hamas's murderers must not escalate into a full regional war. America's credibility is on the line, proving it is still a major player in the Middle East and will back its allies when the worst happens. It's also a message to Russia and China to keep out of the region.
What we're actually doing, including the deployment of these aircraft carrier battle groups. Again, not to provoke anyone, but to send a very clear message of deterrence, that no one should do anything that widens this conflict in any way, or that furthers aggression against Israel from any other direction.
The United States has also thrown the might of its arms industry behind Israel with rapid resupplies of ammunition.
We heard from what the Israeli leaders about what is needed. And in munitions, we heard about precision-guided bombs. We heard about Iron Dome replacement. We heard about 155mm mortars. We heard about JDAMs and many other things.
And not just munitions. The U.S. can rally the Western world to diplomatically support Israel and maintains a crucial Security Council veto to keep the UN in line. But this support comes with a diplomatic bottom line, a set of lines Israel must not cross. The Biden administration has demanded Israel lift the siege of Gaza and restore water to the Strip, something Israel has done. Despite Hamas's atrocities, the U.S. says Israel must minimize civilian casualties and should not reoccupy Gaza and maintain the ability for a two-state solution going forward. Restraint may be a bitter pill for Israelis still shocked by the brutal massacre of Israeli civilians, but American support will be critical on the battlefield and beyond.
We want to turn now to former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Danny Ayalon. Ambassador Ayalon, thank you very much for joining us. Before we discuss the Biden visit and what's at stake, breaking news in the past minute, Hamas spokesperson is saying that, first of all, giving numbers, talking about 200 hostages being held by Hamas and 50 held by others, let it be the Islamic Jihad or Gaza's civilians. We do not know that, but 200 by Hamas, 50 by others, and stating for the first time that every person who has been held hostage with foreign nationality, as in an Israeli citizenship and a foreign one, will be released as soon as they can, according to the Hamas spokesperson. Danny, this is the fruit of whose labor? Let's put it that way.
Well, I would say mostly the Americans. The Americans are, with all their allies, with the UN, with humanitarian organizations, with the Red Cross, the International Red Cross. All these are actually trying to put the maximum pressure on Hamas and on those who can pressure on Hamas, whether it's Egypt, whether it is Qatar, mostly. And the fact that Hamas now is beginning or showing some signs of releasing at least those with foreign citizenship means that they believe now, that they understand now the enormity of their mistake, because having citizens from 40 some different countries is just a liability, and they are in a bind in a way.
Yeah, but you cannot eat the cake and have it too. You cannot brag that you're kidnapping civilians, streaming it live on Facebook while doing so, and then change your mind. But hopefully this will indeed be the case in the opening for the release of many more, all of them, as soon as possible. Ambassador Ayalon, the American president might very well be arriving here this coming Wednesday, the day after tomorrow. And it's not just the optics. There are those who suggest that the warm embrace of the Americans to Israel will turn into a bear hug, as in that the American involvement will hold Israel back, or giving decision makers here in Israel an excuse not to go full force. But with all these speculations, the bottom line is that the American president is arriving in Israel at the peak or the beginning of a vicious war. It's not just sending a message is an understatement.
Ellie, this is nothing short of unprecedented. It's something which is amazing. We've seen American presidents going into war zones, but this was when American troops were involved, whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan. There were American President Biden also went to the Ukraine, but this was long after the war started. Here we see that well, from day one, actually for a few hours after this vicious attack, this barbaric attack by the Hamas terrorists, we saw President Biden coming and standing in front of the camera throughout the world and sending a clear warning to basically, without mentioning names, but it was Iran and the Hezbollah, and also standing very, very, I would say, forcefully behind Israel. Now, this was also corroborated by deeds, sending an airlift of munitions that Israel needs for resupply, and not mention the strike forces. First of the Gerald Ford, and now the
Eisenhower. Yeah. Ambassador Ayalon, we need to put a stop right here because we're taking a very, very quick break, but we'll continue in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a few.
Over 1,300 people murdered and more than 3,000 injured, and the war with Hamas continues. We bring you first-hand testimonies from the front lines, from those who survived, and all the records of the atrocities by Hamas. Follow us as Israel fights terror from the south and north. Get the inside scoop on what's going on. Only on I-24 News.
Quisiéramos saber desde dónde nos están viendo.
Todo lo que deben hacer es preparar el teléfono, apuntar el lector de QR y así se abre un breve cuestionario muy fácil de completar.
Otra opción es ingresar en el link que aparece en la pantalla.
Esperamos vuestras respuestas.
Makasubay sa hamon ng buhay mo. Pero yung magre-reklamo ka naman na tatlong nasa hotel ka lang din naman. Siyempre kung kulang yan, masalamat na lang din tayo.
Sabi sa'yo, mami, totoo yung chismis.
Israel is officially in a state of war. This is a very active scene, and we even get in the car as we're talking.
More than 100 soldiers and civilians have been kidnapped.
Just don't know anything. Entire families, including babies and children and elderly, were butchered in their beds.
Awaken the giant, and we are ready and we are strong.
Everyone is showing up. This is the unity.
Welcome back to our special broadcast here on I-24 News. We're back with former U.S. Israeli ambassador to the U.S., former Israeli deputy foreign minister, Ambassador Danny Ayalon. Ambassador Ayalon, thank you for staying with us. We were discussing before the break the pending visit of the American president here in Israel as early as this week. No doubt unprecedented, and the American backing in Israel, no one's doubting it. And yet, it is important to say it's not just because of the American support in Israel. It's not 100%, but again, 200%. But we're all talking American interests here at this point in time. This modern version, if you will, of the axis of evil.
Oh, absolutely. The Americans do understand very, very clearly that although the battle right now is in Gaza, but the war is a global war, and on the divide is Western civilization as such, and on the other side is jihadist movement, is jihadist culture led by Iran and all its proxies, and behind Iran is China with all its economic support, North Korea. This is nothing short than the fate of the world, which is in the balance, and this is why we see, on top, of course, of the great friendship of Biden and the American people in the administration to Israel, we also see that they understand exactly what's at stake. And this is really the fate of the world and the global community. This is between really bad, evil, and the good and the future of civilization, I would say. Yeah. There is also one thing which may be in the cards. Usually when American presidents come for such a visit, first and foremost is solidarity, maybe coordination, but it could be also, one of the American immediate interests here right now is the release of the hostages, certainly the American hostages. One would think that, if the president comes here, maybe there is something behind the scenes where he can fly out of here with American hostages, play the possibility. Of course, we'll have to understand what is the price tag, and maybe some humanitarian packages that will be pushed into Gaza. We'll have to wait.
Yes, indeed, and that sounds just about right, considering the message, the announcement by a Hamas spokesperson those last few minutes that all hostages with dual nationality will be released as soon as they can. This is according to the Hamas spokesperson. For the first time, talking about between 200 and 200 to 250 Israelis being held hostage, not even counting, not taking into considerations the others held by other groups in the Strip. Ambassador Daniel, thank you very much for this. And before we unpack further the catch-22, if you will, when it comes to the hostages here in studio with Major General Eitan Dangot, we do want to jump up north. Robert Swift, 24 News correspondent there. Robert, another busy day on the northern front. Hezbollah moving from poking to provocation. Question being, to more?
Indeed, there was a sort of a sense that maybe the constant skirmishes that have been taking place here in recent days might be calming down a little bit. There was a slight lull during the first half of this day, and I think there was maybe a feeling that that was due in part to the evacuation of 28 communities on the Israeli side of the border, an evacuation of around 10,000 citizens. And it was perhaps hoped that removing them was maybe the reason for the calm, but that calm did not last long. It didn't make it into the evening, with a series of attacks and exchanges of fire taking place. Hezbollah using small arms fire to attack surveillance towers on the Israeli side of the border, and launching once again anti-tank missiles towards Israeli vehicles on the southern side of the border. And Israel responding to both incidents with artillery fire. This was just one of, these are just some of the incidents taking place, also with a reported infiltration on the eastern end of the northern border around Metula, and explosions, apparently artillery fire, also taking place in some points along the border. And all of this comes without mentioning events taking place slightly further to the north, where there was reported to be airstrikes, foreign sources attributing them to Israel. This is believed to be attacks against the Damascus airport. The second time in 4 days that the Damascus airport has been attacked, along with the Aleppo airport. Both the runways at these two facilities were put out of action just a few days ago, but modern militaries can repair them again, likely necessitating the runway being struck again.
24 News correspondent Robert Swift up in the north. Thank you very much for this. Back here in the studio with Major General Eitan Dangot. Major General Dangot, before we go back to the issue of the hostages, when we're talking about the northern front, what will be considered more than just a provocation? What will be a move that Israel can no longer, quote unquote, contain?
I would say that we are on escalation. We went from provocation to escalation. There is escalation in the border. There is fights. They are using elements all over the border between Lebanon and Israel of trying to enter to Israel by a capping of terrorists from Hezbollah, launching anti-tank missile, mortar shells on the area of where people are living in some of the villages there. And what we need more, and it's deployed among all the area, all the 75 kilometers that are on the border between Rosh Hanikrat to Metula. But to raise to a war from this part of escalation, it's something that we have a gap. Till now, I think that each event was like a circle, while you have exit points that say it is come as a reaction to your activities. Israel moved it immediately when it started the reaction of Hezbollah to react against Hezbollah and didn't hesitate. So now Hezbollah, for example, the last launching or anti-tank missile from Hezbollah towards Israel was according to the fact of Israel bomb or strike Hezbollah. But we are closing this kind of road that we are moving and are coming towards each other, and I believe we are entering to 48, 72 hours that are critical, because if it Gaza.
Yeah.
We are readiness, but it is changed towards the heavy structure of Hezbollah with rockets, with ground. It's different, and I think that Israel already made measures and activities like moving the population from 0 to 2 kilometers in order to create an area while you are freed on buffer zone, while the military activity will be freely to react immediately, and this is very important thing for the coming future. Another issue is that the reserve divisions that prepared towards interfere or to move towards ground activities are full readiness. They were armed, they are trained, they are making their plans. So when the time is coming, the start point much more prepared on the ground by Israel as a lesson from 2006. And one thing which should be clear, Lebanon as a country will lost its national structure very quick in the Israeli reaction. And I pay your attention, Henley, to the fact that today Mikati, the Lebanese prime minister, said with all the support we are giving to the Palestinians, we are not willing to come to a war with Israel. I don't know how he said it, Hezbollah is the real controller, but the Lebanese is the real. And the sign comes from the ground, as we see, that the civilian people evacuate themselves from the south towards the depths of Lebanon. The movement has been started, but still there is a gap, and still it will be impacted by the visit of Biden, the reaction of Putin, and the issue of Khamenei. We can speak about it later. It's much more than a local war.
Yeah, and at this point in time, as you were saying, Major General Dango, to every action, there's a reaction, and it is
closing a
close circle.
And get exit points to see what will be later on.
Well, we are monitoring all throughout the broadcast the Israeli news channels, and it seems that there's a first sign of life from an Israeli being held hostage in the Gaza Strip. Hopefully, we will be able to get the gist of it soon, but I do want us to circle back to the issue of the hostages,
yes,
Major General Dangot, because it is very much of a catch-22 here. That's perhaps an understatement. As we noted at the beginning of the broadcast, Hamas leaders know that there are dead men walking, period. And that might push them even further to the extreme. What will Israel do in a hellish scenario in which Yahya Sinwar is sitting next to a 5-year-old Israeli boy being held hostage there, and the Israeli units will have the choice between killing this art terrorist with a 5-year-old Israeli boy, or Mohammed Def sitting with a 85-year-old Holocaust survivor?
I can describe you even much more worse scenarios. What do you think about after what we faced in last Saturday? Do we need more to imagine what they can do to this hostage? But I would start, with your permission, with the statement of the Hamas spokesman tonight. There is few things I would like to emphasize. First, to ourselves, I think that the pressure that is raised by the Israeli public, by the families, came to and also by Biden. The Israeli Prime Minister met today the representative of the families people, and I don't know whether he do it in such a quick way after Biden met them in New York.
Right.
But this issue is raised to be on the table as a part of what we are fighting. I think in a right way they should do. Secondly, I think the Hamas that is aware to Biden visit and aware to the damage they did to themselves with taking babies, they took older people, they took women, they took a grandmother with the 3 children, the grandchildren of them, and the fact that was double civilianship of those people. Hezbollah is, before Biden is coming, making 2 things. Once, they admit about the number. Basically, they are lying. They could keep for themselves a gap of the number. Secondly, it means they are bothering from the fact of Biden. But the third, they signals one word he said at the end, when the condition will allow us to release, so it's for them a car. All this issue, from my experience, I was military secretary of the Minister of Defense 2006, and we have only Gilad Shalit and two hostages in Hezbollah that were both dead.
Yeah.
But with all this thing, you see that in this field, you need secret in the negotiation and loudness to bring it through to the state of mind that Israel will not give up. And in my opinion, I said it at the beginning, it's a window time to praise Hamas and to try to achieve effective, maybe, agreement about
it. Seems that something is moving indeed, because following the statement by Hamas spokesperson that they will release all hostages with a dual citizenship, they are sending a first sign of life from one of the hostages. We're getting this clip prepared for you. Again, this is released by Hamas. You can see now the video on screen. We will get the sound ready shortly. This girl is named Maya Shem. She has a French citizenship alongside her Israeli citizenship. She was abducted to the Gaza Strip from the rave, this music festival in Kibbutz Re'im, and this is the first sign of life of an Israeli hostage in the Gaza Strip. Obviously, again, this is released by Hamas. We will soon hear what she is saying, but we do need to take into consideration that Hamas is using every possible manipulation in its favor. No other way to put it. We will be getting this clip for you shortly, but now very much on topic. We're talking about propaganda. This war is perfect fake news storm, if you will, misinformation, disinformation, and deep fake, all recruited to promote Hamas propaganda. And the issue is, it is working. So how can you fight back? And is big tech doing enough? Is not doing anything, essentially means taking sides. We want to welcome now Rafi Mendelson, Vice President of Cyber, from joining us now live. Thank you very much, Mr. Mendelson. So do we have any ability to detect the scope of fake news at the moment, fake accounts, fake posts?
Thanks for having me on. The news is that we can actually detect fake accounts, and that's what Cyber has been working hard doing. What we've uncovered is a massive scale of fake accounts, pro-Hamas and coordinated fake accounts across social media platforms, and that shows us the extent to the disinformation and the narrative that are being, the bot narratives being spread, but also gives us an idea of the scale of the operation that's taking place in the online battleground.
So this disinformation tsunami, if you will, is to an extent backed or even fueled by the action, or more accurately, lack thereof, by social media platforms themselves.
Well, the problem of disinformation and fake accounts on social media is not specific to this event. Cyber as a company actually happens to be headquartered in Tel Aviv, but we track foreign interference when it comes to elections. We were monitoring the Russian invasion of Ukraine. As a company, we work with governments to identify fake accounts and disinformation across the online space. And so when it came to this, we were expecting a high level of activity. But what we saw, we were kind of blown away with. In terms of the sophistication, the scale, we've been able to uncover over 40,000 fake pro-Hamas accounts that are actively participating in conversations online and spreading those false narratives. So it's something we expected to happen. Fake accounts across social media is a known problem, and it's something that is used by malicious actors, whether it's for power, influence, or for money. But here too, we saw it, and when we started to uncover the conversation around Israel and the war and Hamas,
we were able to uncover, as I said, over 40,000 fake accounts who were acting in a very coordinated way to push out specific false narratives.
So Mr. Mendelson, how can you fight back? Simply put, how can you make sure that you're not supporting it by proxy? To engage or not to engage, to report, not to report?
Well, I think your question is divided into two audiences. Firstly, for the intelligence services to know the scale of the problem and understand actually, yes, there is a massive issue, and to identify and direct their activities in terms of working with the social media platforms to bring down the huge number of fake accounts. But individuals, those of us who are following the news, either in Israel or outside, journalists, media who are following the news, I think it's very important that people take an extra moment to really study the information that they're taking in. As we've seen over the last few days, the imagery videos are incredibly emotive, sometimes incredibly distressing and horrific. And so that draws us in and brings out a response. So I think it's important that everyone takes a moment and also crucially checks the source of the profile. We see some fake accounts that were created over a year and a half ago and were lying dormant, not really doing much. And then over the last, the first 2 days, the 7th and 8th, we've seen them posting out over 600 times. And so we see specific behaviors of accounts. And so for us as individuals, when we're engaging with that kind of information, take an extra moment to look at the accounts, look at the information, look at the profiles. If they're posting every few minutes, then that's an indication. However,